Hello and welcome to episode 315 of Hot Media. I'm Bob Mann. And whenever I send out a tweet, I very often expect to get disagreement. Usually it's when we're doing a show about news or the political aspects of media. It might be something I said about the former president. I'll expect that. But in terms of an entertainment related tweet, now there's a tongue twister, an entertainment related tweet, I'm not expecting to get too much disagreement, but I got one from one of my good friends ever since college, who is also a regular here on the Hot Media podcast, and that is Len Klatt. Now, what I wrote was about the new movie, which is being the Ricardos. It's on Amazon Prime, and it's also in theaters for those of you who are willing still with the Omicron variable to go in there and go into a movie theater. And I wrote very simply that for those of us who love TV history, this is a great movie, and I really enjoyed it. Well, Len, if you've heard the podcast or seen us on YouTube, has been working in media his entire career as a broadcasting executive, but also a television producer, and living in Hollywood, knows an awful lot of the people who were there firsthand. So I thought that this would be an absolutely fascinating way to take a different look at the movie being the Ricardo. So, Len, thank you very much for being here again on Hot Media. And please let us know what exactly it is that has you disagreeing with me about the benefits or lack of benefits, the quality of being the Ricardos.
Well, Bob, thanks for letting me be here. Enjoy it always. Um, if you had caught me right after I watched the movie, you would have gotten more of a venomous Linda Blair exorcist type rant. Which, the only one who got that was I called my writing partner and I ranted to him. But I was very interested in seeing this movie because we had, my writing partner and I had a very interesting perspective because we actually knew and we're friends with two of the people that are depicted on screen. And that would be the two writers of Bob Carroll Jr. and at the time Madeline Pugh, then Madeline Pugh Davis. We had developed a friendship with them. They were very accommodating to us. They mentored us to a degree. Bob's nickname for me was Yonkers, from where I'm originally from. And one of the things that we will always hold dear to our hearts, my writing partner and I, is that they said that if we had met them 15 years earlier, we would have been working for them.
What's interesting, though, is that the people who you know were not, in my mind, or at least to my mind, portrayed in a negative fashion. I think that the producer got bashed a little bit, but it seemed as if these were people who fought very hard for the integrity of the show, and that the female writer was, and again, this could be something that was just added as fiction and something to fit the sensibilities of 2021, 22, talking to Lucy about her feminist image or lack of when she had to get permission from her husband, Desi, or Ricky, depending on whether you wanted to use the real life name or the fictional name. In what ways, very specifically, do they feel and do you feel that the movie was inaccurate? Because I went and made the statement, I love this because this is great for anybody like me who loves television history. And if you feel that this is off in terms of television history, I'd like to get your first person account of that.
It went off the rails for me pretty quickly because if you remember, one of the first, they framed this movie as a documentary, and they had, of all people, Linda Lavin playing an older version of Madeline Pugh. And the irony there is Linda Lavin had played Alice on TV in a sitcom in the late 70s, early 80s. The showrunners for 8 of the 10 seasons were Bob and Madeline. But it went off the rails because one of the memories that she's talking about with regard to working on I Love Lucy was that if Lucy and Desi weren't tearing their heads off, they were tearing their clothes off. We knew Madeline. Madeline would never have said anything like that. And it was the relationship between Bob and Madeline in that was depicted in the movie that really, really struck a bad chord with us, because there are several scenes where she's very belittling of him. There's a
Oh, that
scene
she thought of it first and then he took credit.
there's
I
a
saw a
table
couple of
read
those scenes. I said that first.
which the first table read they show you, there's a lot of venom between particularly Vivian Vance and William Frawley. Now, they did not get along. That is true. But they were civil to one another from everything we were ever told. And that type of scene would never have happened. And then Frawley has a funny line or funny insult. And on the other end of the table, Madeline says to Bob, "That's funnier than anything you've written in the past week." That never would have happened. Never would have happened.
Okay, let me get into some of the things that I find very important and why I said that for those of us who love TV history, this is a great movie. When I teach a course called TV Show Genres at Caldwell University, you've actually been a guest lecturer in that particular course, talking about your digital sitcom, which we'll talk about and have an update before we end this particular episode. But the key things to me about the incredible work of Desi Arnaz and Lucille Ball, number one, creating the 3-camera comedy shoot. Maybe you have to be a real TV geek to even care about that, but I think it's something where when people think that Ricky Ricardo was just a silly stereotype, Desi Arnaz was a brilliant man and a brilliant producer, and he created that. Number two, the idea that they fought against Lucy and Desi in real life, the racism and the ethnic ignorance of the network in terms of saying, "Oh, well, America will never buy you being married to that man to whom you're really married in real life." Number three, that they really invented modern syndication in the sense that, hey, you know what? We're just going to go out and create Desilu. Although I think the movie kind of missed the fact that the network told them that they had to do it, but everybody knew the power of Desilu, and you could see Desi's power behind the scenes, and he did not like being patronized. Do you feel, Len, that the movie, in terms of those bigger things, other than the people who you knew and how they really are, do you think the movie hit the right chords when it comes to that aspect of television history and that show?
Not really. Okay, there's a lot of factual inconsistencies that a lot of people know about, and they would fill several bottles of Vitamita Vegemin if you could pour them into that. They compacted a lot of things that happened into the production into a single week of production. But that is Aaron
Isn't
Sorkin's
that literary
style.
license, though? I mean,
That's
can't
literary
do we
license.
really want to see
True,
how the sausage
true,
is made to that extent?
true. Indeed, had they left out a lot of the factual inconsistencies, the real movie that could have been interesting would be one that actually showed them getting it on the air and how they did have to fight because they didn't believe America would accept a couple that was where the husband was Hispanic. Um, they certainly could have shown how he developed the process, and there were a lot of bumps and grinds to the process. On the very, very first night, we heard the story directly. On the very, very, very first night that they shot I Love Lucy, an I Love Lucy episode, the city of Los Angeles, I want to say it was the fire department, I might be wrong, showed up and was going to stop the production because the live studio audience had no access to a bathroom. And so what they did to get around that was Lucy opened up her own personal bathroom to the audience. So there's a lot of intricacies in developing what they developed that would have been interesting to film. But Sorkin felt the need to be a bit more salacious. You had scenes of them arguing where she's calling him a Cuban dimwit. You had the, almost, required sex scene between Lucy and Desi. If there
But do
was
you
an
think that those things didn't happen? I mean, don't you think, I mean, didn't they have a real Hollywood romance, and didn't they have issues of infidelity, and weren't they on and off? They did get divorced in 1960 when the show ended.
sure.
I mean, these things are real, and they are the things that make them human beyond the fact that they're icons in media.
If you the anger that you saw from most of the characters in that movie, um, if there was truly anger on a TV production like that, it never would have resulted in a product that has lasted 5 to 6 generations.
Just talking about the show though itself, let's get away from the movie. I actually would like to talk a little bit about the
Mhm.
contribution of I Love Lucy. It is amazing that something like this can last, because even with some of our favorite sitcoms, we look back at Mary Tyler Moore, and so many people died from the cast
Yeah.
and from the production team last year in 2021. That the show got a lot of attention, but we're still remembering it fondly, but it's not part of our everyday life. I mean, I Love Lucy can actually be part of your everyday
Mhm.
life no matter where you live on the planet. What was it about that show? What was it about those people? And I don't want to say just those people being Desi and Lucy, but those people including Frawley and Vance, who really had that chemistry. What was it about those actors that made this something that, let's put it in the present tense, that makes this something that really just lasts?
The characters were relatable. It was a great mix of funny dialogue and funny slapstick. And indeed, because they were filming before a live studio audience, and Jesse had mastered the multicam process, there was an energy. There's still an energy to those shows. You can hear the laughter. And that, I think, it basically adds to the superior quality of the show, and it's what it made it last. I mean, people who can still recite lines or know exactly when this moment's going to happen, and you may have seen that moment 100 times, but you want to see it the 101st time.
I mean, I am getting pretty up there, you and I, in age. And this show was on CBS before we were born, as a matter of fact.
Long
My
before we were
mother
born.
was, well, you could say long, but my mother was pregnant at the exact same time, and she was allowed to say pregnant, as Lucy was pregnant with little Ricky. It really is kind of an amazing thing that the humor lasts when so many things have now become corny, or so many things are uncomfortable to us in retrospect, in terms of the modern society. That this can last is amazing. You can show Vitamita Vegemin, which is 23% alcohol. There's something that sticks in your head. That they'll laugh. They were born in the 21st century, and they'll laugh. Other sitcoms just can't achieve that. Other TV programs, dramas, can't achieve that. Let just not to turn this into a TV production class, but we're throwing around the terms the multi-camera shoot. What were the production standards of sitcoms when television first started, and why is it that it really wasn't conducive to laughter, spontaneity, or a good comedy? What is it exactly that Desi Arnaz, in his role as president of Desilu and one of the executive producers, that he did production wise to make it the modern day sitcom from a production standpoint?
Well, most of the original sitcoms that started in the early 50s all had their roots in radio. I mean, I Love Lucy was a radio show called My Favorite Husband, and Bob and Madeline had written for that along with Jess Oppenheimer.
And the
Uh,
movie does cover that.
yes, and translating that over, and it was all devised because he felt Lucy worked best in front of a live audience, and how he jiggered up the process so that they could do that with 3 cameras and now it's 4 cameras. And the fact that this has stayed with us, because I Love Lucy begat another Desi Lou show, Our Miss Brooks, also roots in radio. And then it just went on and on from there, and it just took root.
It is interesting, though, that we're finally seeing the death of the multicam in studio sitcom. Some of Chuck Lorre's shows are still done that way, but the single camera really came into vogue with the American version of The Office and with Modern Family. Do you feel that the single camera sitcom is not as funny? Is it better? Is it just a different animal? What are your thoughts on the loss of the multi-camera live audience sitcom as it becomes more and more the single camera post-production shoot?
I think it's the lack of energy. And going back to, and some of the best and some of the longest running and still being watched by other generations comedies, they're all multicam for the most part. I don't know if you're going to get a shelf life with shows like Modern Family or even The Middle. They're all good shows, they're funny shows, but you don't get the same energy from them. The energy also is in the process of making it. You get more energy from the actors when they're feeding off of an audience, as opposed to doing, well, I do scenes 2 3 times, but you really feed off that laughter and that energy. I can't talk about that enough, because I think that that's really, really missing in a lot of situation comedies today.
Do you feel that the genre called comedy could be merging with drama? Because the so-called dramedy started years ago in the 80s, but I heard someone say, I forget whether it was a student or a critic or an academic, that life isn't a punchline every 30 seconds, that
Oh, sure.
even the funniest things in life have to go hand in hand with tragedy or routine, and that the multi-camera sitcom doesn't lend itself as much to that as the single camera shot, because of the fact that if you're in an audience and you're looking for that energy, you're looking for hitting those beats and giving us a laugh every couple of seconds.
I think what you're getting in the hybrid is more applicable to drama shows invoking the occasional laugh and getting the mixture of life that way, as opposed to what you just said, the multicam before an audience. You're waiting for the beat, you're waiting for the laugh, and the setup. Some of the I've been revisiting on Hulu a show that I watched when it was first on, but I have never seen since. I've been revisiting Picket Fences. Clearly a drama, but I have had some of the biggest belly laughs in the last 2 weeks from watching that show, because they do mix it very, very well.
And just to wrap it up on this particular subject, I really still like the movie. I know that if you know somebody and you know what they're like or what they were like in a certain time, and they're portrayed very differently, that can be upsetting. But I still think, and Len, I'm not trying to say you're wrong. This is a matter of educated opinion. The to me, I think it captures something about television, and especially the genre that we call situation comedy, that is still kind of important. And it's getting a lot of great reviews. Just one last thing: what did you think of the performances? I know that you feel that there are tremendous inaccuracies and that they really didn't hit the beats that you felt were most important. But what do you think about the acting and the dialogue in the
I,
production?
I don't think it was particularly strong. I don't think they captured Desi Arnaz at all. From everything that we used to hear about him from Bob and Madeline, he was even more good looking in person than he was on screen. He was incredibly charming. I don't think you got that from Javier Bardem. Um, Bill Frawley was made into this sage character, who had these philosophical things to say. In truth, we've heard about Frawley is he literally would take the script every week and rip out the pages where his name wasn't on it. And most of the time, he didn't know what the story was. Um, but he was a total professional who just came, did his lines, went home. And the only perk that, he had a drinking problem. He had to stay off that for the show. Desi made him promise that and pledge that. And the only other accommodation they ever made for Frawley was every year, if the Yankees were in the World Series, he got that week off.
I pretty much have that deal at Caldwell. I have it all built in, as a matter of fact. That's how I've seen the Yankees win the World Series in person 3 times.
And Nicole Kidman's performance, I really couldn't. Lucy was comedically very facial, and Nicole Kidman, with the heavy use of Botox, whatever, she seemed to have the same stern look in every scene. And I mean, Lucy and Desi used to call Bob and Madeline the kids. And they thought really highly of them. Desi bought them Jaguars. And Lucy was very, very, very fond of those writers. And I don't think you got that from the performance by Nicole Kidman. I think she was a little bit more. She was almost playing Lucy in the later years post-divorce, when she was running Desilu and here, doing, that was not what she was suited to do. But at the same time, that's the woman who greenlit Star Trek.
Right. This is so true. People forget that Star Trek was actually a ratings failure on NBC in the late 60s, even though it's a worldwide multimedia phenomenon. Just one last thing I'd like to know, a little inside baseball here. The idea, because I've read this in other places, the idea that Lucy didn't want Vivian Vance to look sexy or attractive, that even though they were only 2 years apart in age, that it was really a directive almost from Lucy that Vivian Vance be a bit of an older frump, married to a much older man. Any truth from what you've heard? I know obviously you weren't working on the show, but you know these key people. Any possible truth to that?
I think it's overplayed a little bit, but I do believe, from everything I kind of remember, that I don't know if it was contractual, but it was more, they preferred that there be a bit of a different look between Lucy and Ethel.
Before we go, let's talk about your work. And we have had you on here at least 3 times to talk about your digital sitcom, and it keeps progressing. Just as we always thought we'd be out of COVID, but we still need a digital sitcom. Tell me, you didn't think in 2022 we'd be talking about this. You'd be moving this in a different direction. But tell us about your new season and where people can see it.
Well, it's not a new season. It's our 3rd episode. And the whole impetus for doing a 3rd episode was, because we've been shooting on Zoom, the world's cheapest soundstage, and we really had no appetite to do it again. But we found that there's a number of web series awards that we can put it up for, provided you have 3 episodes. So we've submitted for 3 different awards, actually. And
now, could that cross? Could winning one of those awards or getting a nomination? I'm sorry that I called it seasons. I didn't realize it's merely episodes, but all the work that goes into it is phenomenal.
And one of the glories of particularly doing episode 3, and we turned around episode 3 fairly quickly, was the technical advances that we've learned, particularly from our editor, who actually was moving people around the screen. It's almost like if they were making an entrance from the right, making an exit to the left, you actually saw that happen. So we kind of mimicked what Desi invented in 1951 and updated it for 2021, doing it on Zoom. So we're quite proud of the third episode. We're proud of all of the work, and I'm proud of everybody that's been involved in it, from the actors to the producers to the director to our technical folks. You know, we're really hopeful. There are some ad agencies out there that are matching up sponsors to web series. That is something that we had envisioned was going to happen, and is coming to fruition. And that's where we'd like to, you know, climb onto that bandwagon and almost be as innovative, not as innovative, certainly not comparing ourselves to what Desi Arnaz did, but tying this up into a nice little bow and symmetry in this podcast. You know, we're trying to do something that he did.
Well, you know, maybe to bring it full circle, you can't advertise cigarettes on broadcast television anymore, but maybe Philip Morris could, you know, be the sponsor of Here to There.
I don't think we're going to contribute to that. That was another thing about the movie, is that Bob and Madeline was smoking in the movie, and they didn't really smoke. And the other thing that they missed, which really pains me, is Bob Carroll was very, very famous for having, you can see it in all the pictures from the 50s, probably right till the day he died. He had this almost Rasputin-like goatee, and they didn't have that on the character.
Interesting that, you know, that would be something, especially somebody like Aaron Sorkin would be very careful about. Well, listen, Len, this is a great perspective. I'm recommending the movie. You're certainly not, but the movie is called Being the Ricardos. By the one thing I don't like is the title. I do like the movie, but it makes it sound too much like a modern day reality show. Maybe that's what he was going for. I have no idea.
You know, if you've never seen an episode of I Love Lucy, I think the movie does work. Or if you have a fair to middling appreciation of it, it does work as a standalone. If you have any concept of what goes on to put together a sitcom like that, and if you wanted to see something incredibly historical, I think they missed the boat on a lot of points.
Well, Len, I thank you very much as always. And I certainly wish you a great deal of luck with episode 3. Where do people find it? Please tell people how to find episode 3.
It is on a website called Here to There, HERETO there, THERE, all one word, TV.com. Or if you go onto YouTube, you type Here to There, one word, you'll find our channel there. And it's got a lot of supplemental video as well as the 3 episodes.
Well, this is great. And of course, as I always do, I ask you to hang with me because the video version for YouTube is live to tape. We edit the audio version, so hang in there. So I'll talk to you afterward, and let me wrap things up. But again, Len, thank you so very much for being here.
Always a pleasure, Bob.
And that's it for this episode of Hot Media with Bob Mann. And I thank you very much for watching us. And if you're new, please subscribe, whether you're subscribing on YouTube or if you're on one of the many audio platforms, Odyssey, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And to find out more about the podcast, those of you watching the video can see that right there, www.bobmannhotmedia.com, BOBMANN hotmedia.com. And please follow me on Twitter. You can get all the updates about the show. My handle @BobMannMedia. Again, BOBMANN Media. And please join us every week, whether it be in audio or in video, as we talk about the most important and the hottest controversies and content in mass media right here on Hot Media.